This podcast is part of the Listen Frederick Podcast Network. To learn more, visit listenfrederick.com.
The Fedora Files.
Hello, I'm Gregory Fedora, and welcome to the Fedora Files. So, this week I want to talk to you about something about history. I'm a big history buff. I love history, all kinds of history, which you probably guessed because I'm into folklore and the monsters and just learning things. And I came across something this week that I was like, that's really fascinating, and I wanted to share it with you. World War II is one of my favorite eras to learn about, and I just think it's really interesting how the world came together against the Nazis and Japan at the time, and the fascism, and they, defeated it. And it's just a lot of heroism and a lot of heroic stories that you can learn from. And I might get into some other time, but there was a story, and it's not necessarily about heroism, but a story about how playing on fears. And if you didn't know, like, Hitler was very into the occult and religions and seeking out those things. I mean, he really did look for the Ark of the Covenant. He did really look for the Holy Grail. He looked for the Spear of Destiny, as well as all these other religious artifacts. So it's interesting, like, the Indiana Jones series. I've always said the best ones are when you have the Nazis involved, because, at that just era, that feel, and him fighting against the Nazis is just a cool feeling. One of my favorite parts, in the Avengers, Captain America, the first one, I really liked because, Red Skull was the bad guy. Again, it was the Nazis going against them because they're just evil. It's just, it's hard to think of them as being human almost. They're just so profoundly just dark. But Hitler did this thing, and this was near the end of the war. Is in like the late, the 1944 time period, and it actually went on beyond the war. And but it started in 1944. They had this group called the Werewolves, and they were playing on the fear of not only the people in the Germany, but of the Allied groups, because they knew that Hitler was experimenting and trying to do experimental things with people, with prisoners, and they let things out, like what they were trying to do, and it was, disturbing experimentation. But he had not turned people into werewolves at all, but they played on this fear, and they had a werewolf unit, and these guys were very guerrilla-style warfare, where they knew they were losing, so they were really trying to prolong the war in a way, because they knew they were going to lose, but they wanted to try and figure out a diplomatic way, the best for them as Germans, for Hitler, for his inner circle, because they didn't want to be killed. They were hoping they could come to a diplomatic arrangement, but they needed to prolong it so that they could come up with an idea. And so they had this werewolf unit. And basically they were, small groups, and they were attacking individuals. Like if, an American soldier was driving a Jeep alone, they would attack it. And it would be a brutal attack to almost look like it was bestial or animalistic in nature. And they left a symbol. It was terrifying. Like, it was like an angled and then line, and then angled, and then a straight line. It's very similar to the swastika, but it was different. And they were the werewolves. And these guys, Goebbels really tried to get the German people behind this, and tried to get them, and some did, but some were afraid. Some actually thought these were people that, because of the brutality of the attacks, were becoming animals, like animalistic, and they had a fear of it. And so the people of Germany were fearful, but some of the Allied forces, they superstitious. they had a fear as well of what was happening and who these people were. And they really didn't know if, like, Hitler had developed a way to, like, have a half human, half, you know, animal group doing these things. And so a lot of fear. And now the interesting thing is that when World War II ended, these dudes were still trying to disrupt. Like, once, you know, they failed their first mission, which was to prolong the war, because they really didn't. The Allies still got in. Hitler, you know, supposedly committed suicide. There's, you know, people who believe that no, he didn't. I'm on the fence on that, just because of some of the stuff, like, that we know now about the body they found. So, you know, was it him or not? I don't know. Can't be sure. I know he's dead now. But anyway, so they didn't succeed at prolonging the war at all, but they continued to attack, and they wanted to destabilize well into 1947, almost 1948. This werewolf squad was still out there trying to do things, and I found it interesting because no one talks about that. It's just one of these stories that's out there, and it's just a unique idea because they're trying to play upon the fear of the unknown, the fear of monsters, and they're trying to capitalize on people's, you know, superstitions and fear. And I found that quite interesting because I'm not a fearful person, but I'm an inquisitive person, and I like to find out these things. I like to hear these stories. I like to know the folklore, and I think it's good to know these things. That's why one of the things, like, I want to, like, when I do books about, like, the Happy Little Monster books, and just when I do the videos about it, I like to explain what these things were, what people thought they were, and where they were. Whether they are real or not, you knew or heard about them. And it kind of, they're still mysterious, but then they're less frightening because you understand what the people were thinking. And I think that was what, like, the Nazis tried to do. They played upon people's not understanding things and not knowing what was really going on. And we still deal with that today. People have fear. I mean, we dealt with, like, when the unknown is there and you face the unknown, it can be fearful. Like, we just dealt with that with COVID. There was a lot of unknowns in this, to the point that people took sides on and were angry with one another because of how they viewed in different things, like pro, mask, anti-mask, and pro this, like, but instead of coming together, we let the fear divide us. And this werewolf group did the same thing. There was a lot of fear, and it divided the German people. Which I guess in this case it was good, because, you know, they didn't all get behind it, and, like, because that could have prolonged it. But we can learn a lesson that sometimes if we allow fear to divide us, we get conquered. And the Germans got conquered, which was a good thing. I just want that to be clear, that it was good. But sometimes we need to look into this, what we fear. We need to face the fear. An interesting analogy is, like, with the, and this is off topic of the werewolves, but buffalo, when a storm comes, they turn towards the storm and face it, and they just burrow into it, and they go right into it. They don't back down from the storm. Like, when, like, big blizzard, and they're like, we're going in. And that's how our mindset should be. And that's kind of what America did during World War II when these werewolf attacks were happening. It's interesting that I found out as I was reading and researching this, when 9/11 happened and George Bush was talking, he actually made a speech, and he referenced the Nazi werewolves, and he was saying that they were not going to allow the current terrorists be like the werewolves of World War II. And I kind of remember that speech, but I don't I wasn't putting it all together. I wasn't understanding what he was meaning. But it's just a kind of a cool part of our history. It's kind of cool that, you know, we rose above the fear of the unknown. But it's an interesting, you know, thing to think about, how people can use a mythological or story and use it to further their agenda. We can't let them use our monsters for that. Do not let them use monsters for evil, but only for good. And I just want to thank you for those of you who stopped by and are checking out my show. Thank you for doing so. And until next time, stay safe and keep searching.
The Fedora Files.
Check out FedoraCRT.com today.